Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Mid-Tier Thoughts. I'm joined today by my buddy Crackshot Preparedness. We're going to be talking about all kinds of cool stuff, but before we do, big shout out to Blackout Coffee. If you like coffee that tastes good and supports the Second Amendment, check out the links down below for Blackout Coffee. Also, if you're looking for new guns, ammo, or all the accoutrement to go there with, check out USA Go, United States Association of Gun Owners down below. They've got everything from legal protection to bullets, guns, you name it. So anything that you need, check them out down below. With that, though, I'm here, like I said, with my buddy Crackshot Preparedness, and I'm going to let him introduce himself real quick.
All right. Well, I'm Nate with Crackshot Preparedness, and we are a bridge the gap company for trauma kits. And they're fully adjustable. They're adaptable to whatever equipment that you're running, whether you're going to be tossing it in a backpack, on a chest rig, on a battle belt, on a assault vest, any of that. They can fit in pretty much any realm that you're needing. Much cheaper than the big boy brands. But,
Absolutely, you are.
We don't skimp on the contents. We're eliminating the markup on pretty much everything on our kits.
That is the nice thing I will say too, is like, we'll talk about it a little bit later in the show as to why they came, but you did send me a bunch of these up here and, just pulling one out of the box. These things, they're not, cheap. You know what I mean? Like they're not what's the word I'm thinking? Like they're inexpensive to purchase, but they're not crappy stuff is what I'm trying to say. Right? Like this seems pretty well put together. The contents of it seem pretty legit. So these kits, you've got that nice like laser cut on the back. I'm assuming that's laser cut. Yeah, I mean it looks super professional. And if you guys check out his website, which I'll have links to that down below, he's definitely way better priced than anywhere else out there, and he's got all the same stuff that everybody else is running. So that is kind of the nice stuff as far as like the interior, the insides of it. It's not like you're not skimping on the medical side of it, and that's one thing I appreciate with that is it's like everything here looks super solid and super good, and it is one of those things where it is kind of nice to see someone of a similar mindset that's like, hey, why don't we make this to where like real people can afford it?
Right. And that was the biggest driving force on these kits. Like I've been doing survival preparedness, shooting, the first aid and trauma, I guess, gear roundup for probably 16 years. And it never ceases to amaze me how expensive some of even the most obscure kits can be. And yes, there's different applications for the kit that you're aiming for, whether it be camping, whatever. But the thing that always got me was when you're coming into a individual first aid kit that, say, I'm going to be running on my plate carrier or in my backpack or all that. I got frustrated because even the most obscure kit was like, man, I'm going to be dropping $200 on this thing, and it's supposed to be a relatively a trauma kit, and you open it up and there's all this extra filler of band-aids and unnecessary items that are not going to serve you very well if you're in a for lack of better words, a shit situation. And then redundantly on that, throwing it on a vest, that's extra weight. Even if it's a little bit, every little bit counts. And started picking apart to create my true what I want to carry, with the idea in mind that if I'm going to be putting this gear on, there's a purpose for it. It's not I'm tired of carrying this around. Let me just shed a couple of layers, like we're dressed up for wintertime. And I was like, I need it to be lightweight. I need it to be durable. I need it to be dependable. And I need it to be real world applicable. I don't need to be digging through Band-Aids while I'm trying to find a gauze pack. So started there and created my own that I carry. And I want to say I carried that on my belt for probably 3 years. And then that's kind of where our company took the turn to be like, you know what? I had my uncle was going to be a range officer at a pretty big event, and he's like, I need a kit. I have nothing. So I sent him exactly what I have, and that's where we took our hard right turn on direction with our company. And we are, first aid and trauma, as well as survival, bushcraft, bug out bags, load out your car. We're just an email away on building somebody their own personal, whether it be kit, load out for the car, bug out bag, vest setup. We're trying to cover as much space as possible and have it be as real world applicable as we can.
Yeah, well, I mean, and checking out your guys' site and everything, and you guys have a ton of cool stuff on there. And then actually, I was thinking about that. That actually would be kind of a cool service, like being like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. Can I just send you money and you build me a survival kit? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of people out there. I think that like it could be really overwhelming when you first get into this. I remember like my first like real deep dive into this stuff, like looking up how people do bug out bags and all this kind of stuff, and you're like, some people are carrying around thousands of dollars a gear. Some people have the best that Ozark Trail at Walmart has to offer. Like
Yep.
it's all over the place. And I know personally, I spent too much money on crap, and then later it was like, cool, now I have a bunch of stuff that doesn't work. What do I do with it?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I got this poncho for $1. And then I put it on and it rips immediately. I'm like, that's why it was $1. you know?
That
So
single ply plastic.
yeah, exactly. You're like, I'm better off with a garbage bag. But yeah, I think that would be actually be something really cool. And I think that is something that is it's kind of understated out there. There's that like, especially with the medical side of things, is there's just a lack of knowledge overall. If that's not your world, that's not your world, and it's really hard to know. I mean, it's like, okay, so it's like when you first get into guns, right? And you're like, $40 red dot, why not, right? And then you buy it, and then you don't know it's ass, because you don't know any better, right?
You'll never know.
Yeah, exactly. And the same thing comes with medical. When you're like, I remember the first IFAK I ever bought was like one of those like $40 like Amazon IFAKs, right?
Hmm.
And I'm like, oh, everything in here is like expired, or it's like the knockoff of the knockoff. Like, oh, this is a training tourniquet. That's okay. That's why it was $8, right? And there's a lot of that where I think that if that's not your world or it's not something you're doing all the time, it's hard to know and get into that. And so I think it's good to see a company like yours out there that's like, hey, like this is quality stuff, but it's also not like $400 for an IFAK, because that's the other thing too, is like it can be exorbitantly expensive, and if you don't know what you're getting, you might have that mindset of like, I'll just buy the best, but if you're more than likely, you're probably just going to be like, I don't know,
Yeah.
40 bucks.
You just grabbing the contents and throwing it.
Yeah, you're
Throwing
like
it
40
in there.
bucks. Why would that not like why would it cost more than that?
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah,
no,
so
that's a big piece of our, I guess, statement that we made on our website is we did, between my wife liking to be in the outdoors and camping and
yeah.
seeing different types of gear, and then mine having it be more of that purpose minded. I probably can't tell you how much money I wasted on going through what I think is the better options, and not necessarily having all the money in the world to do it, is what is the best bang for your buck. And we filtered through as much of that over the years as we possibly can. So whatever we're offering on our site, whether it be bags or gear or first aid stuff, is truly the best that we have found for the applicability. We cut through all the bullshit brands and all the overpriced brands, and really got a true streamlined version that is it's going to serve everybody very, very well.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think you guys are doing great stuff with your guys' kit. I think the whole idea behind everything is really good, and I kind of think back to it's almost like the medical side of like how like T-Rex Arms talks about like the civilian defense industry,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the thing I like to see about this, is that, and that's kind of like the whole reason we started this podcast thing again, is like everything is geared towards like this operator mentality, and like I gotta be a badass operator thing, and like nothing is geared towards just like hey, are you an average dude that like wants to defend your
Yeah.
home and your family? Do you not have 10 years of special forces behind you and like a multi-million-dollar company that you built from scratch? Oh, cool. This is for you then,
Yep.
Like that's my thing, is it's like that it's like yeah, this is all really cool and like really high-end stuff, and I understand like there's a certain argument to like, there's a certain argument for different tiers of gear and things like that, but at the same time, one, some stuff is just overpriced to be overpriced, and two, I'm not that guy, pal.
Yeah. Yep. And we're not here to, like, obviously you can't run a business without making some sort of income off of it. But
Absolutely, yeah.
our crack shop preparedness, we are not, for lack of better words, we're not here to become millionaires. We're not here to just make money, because in
Right.
our reality, the fat and the markup that we're trimming off of pretty much every product that we have, we don't make much, and
Right.
we're aiming it that way, because the purpose of the company is truly purpose driven. We're trying to aim to make a difference rather than, become that millionaire, because I want the guy that works down the street at Burger King that's been, mulling around the idea of becoming more prepared, more self-sufficient, but just doesn't have the money, and he's intimidated by all the crazy pricing and being like, I'm never going to get there.
Yeah.
Well, now we can help you get there.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about it too is it's like we talk about like the preparedness side of things, and I think that's one thing that's always lacking pretty hard is the medical side. And some people harp on it or we talk about it, things like that. But it's not the cool, sexy spot. It's not the thing that's going to get you, the super cool reels on Instagram of running and gunning and all that. But at the end of the day, I mean, you're way more likely to use that than you are your firearm in any given circumstance. We're all prepper, minimum mentality guys, and we all, prepare for the day that the lights go out. But, from a realistic standpoint, I think we all also understand that, like, the odds of that happening, right, are not as good as something where it's like, hey, I had to use a medical thing today. Like, that's way more likely. I can remember a couple years back, I think I talked about it very early on in the podcast that we were driving home from a basketball practice with me and my son, who's like 8 at the time. It was wintertime, and we just watched a car just like action movie rollover, and it was like, thank God I got the IFAK in the car. Luckily, the guy wound up being okay and didn't need it. But, it was like, sweet, we have this available. We're the first ones here, before the fire department's here. We can do something to help this guy. And like I said, I didn't need my gun then, but I definitely needed my IFAK.
Yeah, and that real world applicability is kind of what makes our kit so versatile. Right, so we have the one that you showed where it's a 2-piece, right? You can load it up. It's very low profile. We also have the little car placard that you can put on the back of the headrest for the individual kits.
Yeah,
Quick, easy access. The stuff that's in there, it's all bleed stopper, right? So what's one of the fastest ways you're gonna succumb to a wound, whether it be a car accident, a mishap on the range, a hunting incident, any of that stuff is going to be your fluids are going to leak,
Yeah.
And that idea, honestly came from the kits that they would give us in the oil field. Like our first aid kits were just so subpar, and we're dealing with high pressure equipment that if anything goes wrong, we are screwed. But creating my own kit on the way to work, yeah, same thing. I was the third person to show up on a rollover accident, and the 2 guys before me were out in the middle of the field with the guys that were still in the car, not knowing that one of them just about parked on the guy that got ejected. And as I'm rounding the tailgate of my work truck, I see a pair of shoes, and I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And I run over there and, get within, I don't know, 8 feet of him, and I can hear the blood leaving his body.
Oh my God.
And improvised tourniquet right there. Boom. Grabbed something out of the back of a truck and cinched him up and yelled at the other guys. And then we got tourniquet on him, a legitimate tourniquet on him, stopped the bleeding, and he did survive. But, the real world applicability of knowledge. Yes, we have the, militia minded, the Minutemen, all that stuff. We want to have the gear that is needed to preserve our life, defend our life, but it kind of gets swept over on, okay, I can get in that firefight, but if I get hit or, the buddy next to me gets hit, are we completely out of the fight?
Right.
And, that's where it honestly started as a joke, but be the tactical plumber.
Right. Yeah. Because, well, when you think about, we realize that the human body is just a giant blood balloon, right?
Yeah.
And all it takes is a couple holes and it starts leaking. Like pretty quickly, you start realizing you're like, I need something to plug these holes pretty quick, more than my fingers,
Yep. Because, yeah. And the whole concept of it, is exactly that. Because you cannot stay in any fight, whether it's a fight for freedom, whether you're truly, truly out on the battlefield, whether you're a law enforcement officer, if you're a first responder, fire and rescue, if you're an everyday average civilian that gets caught in one of the holy shit scenarios of an active shooter, you don't necessarily have to have this on your person, but it needs to be attainable in a short amount of time so you can be the tactical plumber. You can get those leaks stopped so you can keep the people that need to be in the fight. And that's
right.
Not always just, shooting back. It's the fight for life.
And the nice thing too about these, like we talked about a little bit about how these are pretty competitively priced, like they're super affordable. The nice thing about that is like you can, because of the affordability of your kit with that too, like you can train with it, right?
Yes.
And it's like I think of it like this way. Like I remember on my when I was deployed in 2022, 2023. I don't know, it was during COVID. I don't know, maybe it was
Yep.
2020. All the years run together. When I was deployed during COVID, it was like we had a dude who a set of Cry precision pants fell off the back of a truck and on their way to our unit. And so I have one pair of the Navy's Type 3 Cry precision pants. And it's one of those things where I'm like, I want to wear these all the time. Like, but I only have one pair and they're super expensive. So I find myself like not wearing them because I'm afraid I'll bust the really nice pair of pants, right? And so it's kind of like that where it's like that's the other downside is like, okay, sick, you got this $400 badass insert soft operator name med kit that I'll never use, and I not even unwrap the plastic because it was $400 and I don't want to replace anything in here, and I've had it for 8 years and everything is expired because I never checked, you know?
Yep. Yep.
And that's the thing is it's like the thing about this is like there's this weird mentality I think with people with medical where so like when you look at gun stuff, right? It's like if we buy an expensive gun, right, we're going to shoot it. We're going to maintain it. We're going to operate with it. We're going to, we're going to put a bunch of rounds in it. We're going to go beat it up in the dirt. We're going to go do stuff with it and be like, yeah. But then when it comes to kit like this, we're like,
Yep.
and I'm like,
Yep.
if anything, it's the same thing. It's like, yeah, it's like, look, this is like the stuff in here, like treat it like you would like ammunition magazines, right? You're going to use it, you're going to replace it, you're going to train with it, right? You're going to get more of it, right? Because you need to be familiar with it. Like, and one of the things, like when I was in the Navy, we were always big on TCCC in the unit I was in. So we were doing TCCC like at least once every 6 months, usually once a quarter for refreshers, and then getting qualified stuff in it. So like that was always a huge thing. Even it's funny enough, like even in the military, like some of it depended on what unit I was in and where we were at as to the quality of our first aid kits. Sometimes it was literally like, oh, this is the $40 one on Amazon. Dope. All right, this is where our largest defense budget in the world is going is $40 IFAKs. Got it. And
Super duper.
yeah, we had one that it's one of those things that to me it feels like it makes a lot of sense on paper, right? But I don't know how well it makes sense in reality. And so it was an IFAK that was flat and it was meant to slide behind your plate, right? So it basically looks like a plate, right? And it slides behind your plate. And my only thought was, yeah, let's put all the important life-saving gear in the most likely place I am to get shot.
Yeah.
Like the idea was in
You don't want
theory,
to have it on the outside because you want to protect it. So you put it on the internal side. It's like,
yeah.
okay, now I did get shot. How do I get this out?
Right. So their thought was like, oh, you'll be able to like undo the bottom, reach in there, snag it out. And I'm like, well, okay, but if I'm getting shot in center, like the most likely place is center mass, and then I have to, I mean, it was like the whole thing was just like, this just seems like it was a really good idea on paper. And once we start playing with it, that it's like, oh, this is kind of dumb.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I think it's really cool to have that mentality though of like having that real world experience and also making it like you said, like your experience from the idea for this came from the oil fields. It didn't have to be, it wasn't like frontline Baghdad, or like when I was kicking doors in Fallujah. It's normal stuff, and that's the other side of this too. Is like everything is like always geared on like this battlefield side of things, which is it's good to have the mentality, I think, and to be prepared for that kind of thing. But to understand that, like you said, you were in an oil field, you weren't, in Ukraine. This was just you were stateside in an oil field, and this stuff can happen anywhere. Like I had to grab mine; it was a car accident on the highway.
Yep.
It's way more likely, or use medical than it is anything else that you're going to have in your kit for this. And to have that, I think again, these are a fantastic option for something like that. But yeah, so like with that though, like what was kind of your experience that kind of led you into the whole like what was your red pill? Like what was your moment where you're like, okay, I'm gonna start being a prepper now and kind of go down this rabbit hole.
Well, it actually started in 10th grade U.S. history class.
Ooh,
There was backstory. I grew up on an 85-acre farm in northern Minnesota. That was
okay,
uh, like 45 minutes in any direction to get to even a small town, right?
okay,
You're truly
yeah,
in BFE farmland, woods, whatever. And I remember watching my dad get prepped up for Y2K, right?
oh yeah,
And we were always pretty self-sufficient. Like if we didn't hunt, we didn't eat very good. if we didn't actually get a deer or whatever. But it wasn't until 10th grade U.S. history class, and we were going over the JFK assassination, right?
Oh.
And this guy, his name was Mr. Carlson, and he went with, here's the narrative that everybody was told, and here's the real piece that happened. Okay, so he's like, you can go one way or the other. I'll teach everything on this side, and I'll teach everything on this side, and you can make your own decision.
That's a good history teacher.
That guy was absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
And went through all the footage, and then went through this other stuff that he had gotten his hands on. And it was probably the most invested in a piece of his class, or any class for that matter, that I had. I was so invested. I was in it. So that started the conspiracy theory minded, which just kind of started wandering me over to the, well, if they would do that, and then there's all these other things that are happening, well, wouldn't it make sense to make sure that I can take care of myself? Because the president got hit with that,
Yeah.
If I'm a nobody, if they're going to do it to somebody that high up, why wouldn't they do it to me? And then we went into the Holocaust, and then we went into the, all this other stuff in his class, and it was just like, damn, I can't rely on anybody but me and potentially my skill and potentially my ability to apply that skill. So I think I'm just going to go for it, and had my first go bag at 19 in my, piece of crap vehicle. And it was just a school bag that I tossed a bunch of random crap in it that sounded good at the time, and refined it from there. But then it hit the, truly patriotic side after 9/11, and I'm like, this country means something to me. I didn't ever end up going into the military or anything like that, but always promised myself that I will make sure that I am not a liability to those folks that have gone and fought for us if that fight ever comes here. And I have to stand next to them and truly defend this country in this country. I don't want to be a liability. So how can I make that more of a reality to who I am? And, it was a lot of out-of-the-box thinking and making training moves that made sense to me at a younger age, made sense to me that now seems silly, but it did ground me in a realistic, civilian minded, how can I make myself better?
Yeah.
And it's kind of just how the dominoes fell, and now I'm sitting with this company that it's like I've learned enough that I want to give some of that back for people that have sat in that or are sitting in that exact same position of where I started.
So yeah, I mean, like that's I think a very similar background to a lot of people when it comes to this type of environment. Is I think at some point we were all kind of exposed to something that made us question the narrative, or just kind of look at things and be like, maybe I should do this for myself. I know, like for me, when I was 16, I read the book 1 Second After. Have you ever read that book? Yeah, so for those unaware, I've talked about it on the podcast before, but it's basically, the premise is that an attack happens and there's an EMP on the United States. It takes place in like rural North Carolina, and it takes place 1 second after the EMP goes off. And so it's the first year of living without electricity in the United States. And all of these struggles at this town of a small town. I say small, it's like a couple thousand people, similar to the size town I live in. So small town of like, and how they manage it and the struggles they face, and honestly make probably a pretty good TV show. It reminded me a lot of, like, I think I was watching Jericho at the same time on Netflix.
Yeah,
when I was reading through this. Yeah, so it was like very like in that vibe. And I've always kind of liked the post-apocalyptic like stories, so I think that kind of played a role in it too. And then being a student of history, I'm a huge history buff. That was the other thing too, is kind of like how you were talking with your history teacher. It's like you start realizing you're like, we put people in camps because they looked different during World War II, even though they were like loyal American citizens. Huh.
And had been for 2 generations.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, we did that. Huh. I wonder if we'd ever do that again. No, that's impossible. We'd never do that again. And it's like things like that where you look at history and you're like, oh, the government has made some really bad mistakes and we've had to pay the price for it. Or like, one of my personal favorites, little well-known fact, I guess that doesn't make any sense what I just said, but Little known fact: MacArthur in the 30s, basically what happened was, so World War One rolls around, and they say, "Hey, if you go fight World War One, we're going to pay you a pension of a certain amount of money every day that you're overseas." Right? It's basically we're going to pay you extra money for volunteering to go fight the Kaiser. Right? So they come back from World War One, and they were promised that they would be paid within by like a certain time period. I think it was like by like 1921 or 23, and they didn't get their money. Congress was like, actually, we has no money, and sorry, boys. And they went out and they posted up in D.C. and they weren't rioting, but they basically, this is a time where people, if they're traveling by train, they're traveling by rail. I mean, like, it's taking a long time, so they've built up like this shanty town. And but these are all veterans from the First World War, and this is the 1920s, so they're not letting this place like get out of hand. Like, they're running their own police through this. They're maintaining everything. Right. And basically their whole thing is like, we're going to camp out on the lawn until you give us the money you promised us. We signed for it, we fought for it, we died for it. Give us our pay. And the U.S. government ordered MacArthur at the time with the cavalry and the local National Guard at bayonet point to remove the veterans and their families from the area. And they gassed them, they used non-lethals, but they straight up cavalry charged into American veterans. This was the U.S. government sending the military against veterans who all they were asking was for their legally entitled pay. That was it. And, it's like, oh, we did that in the 30s. That's not that long ago, Yeah, or you read about, things where people would be like, hey, this idea of like a company town and like the company owning my life and my soul, I don't really like that. We should do something about it. And then the National Guard coming in and being like, no, get back to work. Like that's a large part of American history. And so it's this idea that, again, like if you're just, and we all have this like normalcy bias and this idea of like, we've been a very fortunate country, very separated from the tragedies of the world for a very long time. Right. And not had to face a lot of it because we are the world's top military superpower, the world's top economy, and we're separated by two giant oceans, and our neighbors to the north and the south don't hold a candle to us, right? So we've been pretty well off for a long time. So I think your average person is like, well, why would anything bad ever happen?
Yeah, and that being part of the narrative over the last, say, hard push from the 60s to now.
Yeah.
Of ultimately learning that self-sufficiency out of the population to create a dependent society.
Yeah.
The instant gratification that I don't have to have a garden. I can just go get my produce from the local, here it's King Soopers or Whole Foods or Sprouts or whatever. And then now you fast forward, I don't even know how to make a garden. I don't know how to track an animal. I don't, because it wasn't a necessity for me to know that. Yeah. And even now, there's a certain piece of me that really wishes that I could have picked my grandpa on my dad's side, his brain more about how it was during the Great Depression, because he was a teenager. Yeah. And what did you guys have to do? What was you had to be adaptive, you had to be nimble, and you had to be knowledgeable, or your family died. Yeah. You starve to death. You end up in a soup line or a bread line or whatever. Okay, I don't want... Because my thought process was, if you control the food, you control the people in today's
Absolutely. World. Absolutely you do.
If you have we'll just go with the EMP narrative, right? You have that go off. That first 36 hours is going to be very, very telling. Oh, yeah. And after that 36 hours... we're in Colorado, so we have a ton of rich people that are up in the mountains that have 2 days worth of food in their pantry, right? In their vacation home, whatever. Yeah. So we know something's happened, and they wait, say, 5 days just to make sure everybody's desperate. And then they come over with whatever it is to tell everybody, yeah, all you need to do is to get to this facility, walk through the gate, with whatever you can carry, and we'll take care of you, we'll protect you, and we'll feed you. And because of the mindset that has been created in our society, there's going to be so many people that don't realize the second you walk through that gate, you're never walking out. Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing I think I've talked a lot about that on here before, about like kind of the food security idea behind that. It's like I don't always addressed like the sexiest of topics when it comes to this, and it's like I'm not the guy to be like, oh dude, dual quad,
like quad nods, pack 15. Like I'm not that guy. I'm way more on the side of like, hey, let's of like the idea of community building with that sense,
Hmm.
where it's like like the kind of the post-apocalyptic rebuilding civilization, right? How do I get all
Sure.
these hungry neighbors to not eat each other and rebuild, right? And part of that, big part of that, like I've said, is got like that food security side of things, right? And just like you said, you control the food, you control the people, which means the more of your food supply you control, the less reliant you are on outside sources. Even something as simple as like you have a one backyard tomato plant in your city apartment. Well, guess what? When
Yeah.
you need tomatoes, you don't have to go somewhere else to get them, right? Or you've
Exactly.
got a handful, like that's just that small step, right? Like with us, we've got like a bunch of those like big garden pots that we grow all of our
Yeah.
stuff in. Yeah, just because
Yeah.
with the way our stuff is with our landlord, we can't tear up the yard too much. As much as I want to just make it all a big garden, so we have other ways of doing things, right? And so we get creative with it, but it's like we grow a lot of vegetables that way, and with that too, it's like it's that little bit of self sufficiency when it comes to that, and then same thing with like trying to find ways. We have our ways of getting meat and beef and things like that with other people that we work with, and it's this idea that also having like stored non-perishable stored foods, whether it be like MREs, Mountain House meals, something like that, stuff long term. Because that's the thing too is like even if you have seeds, like great, the power lights went out in October. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
sick,
Now
good
what?
luck. Yeah. So it's understanding that like not only is it one necessary to survival, right? And like you need to have the food and you can control that. But I've said this for a long time. And you kind of touched on there. Food's a weapon, right? And
Exactly.
food is a weapon that can be used for good or evil. So it could be used to control people for negative purposes, or it can buy you friendship, right? In the sense that everyone has this. I think it kind of came from like the Doomsday Preppers TV show mentality, where it's like anyone comes in my yard for a can of beans, I'm giving them both barrels right in the chest. It's like, okay, well, instead of killing your neighbor Jimmy when he comes over for green beans because his family was unprepared, if think about how much goodwill you could buy with
Right.
4 MREs. You know what I mean?
Yep. Well,
Like,
like there's a time and a place for the whole like they're coming on my property to ask for beans and giving them both barrels.
yeah,
There's a time and a place for that,
absolutely.
and it will be very apparent when you've hit that realm.
Yes.
But in the meantime, alliances.
Yeah. Because the biggest thing is like, okay, if you're the only fat kid in the apocalypse, right? Everyone hates you, right?
Yep. And
Because
the
people,
lone wolf dies first.
yeah, well, because there's nothing that bonds people more than mutual suffering, right? And when you're the only one that's not suffering, they fucking hate you. Okay, like there's
100%.
there's no you could be Mother Teresa, and they're like Jimmy's got some weight on him, you
Yeah.
know?
Fuck that guy.
Yeah, exactly, right? So people want you. People are going to look at that. So that's my thing. Is it's like, okay, cool. So we talk about like ideally in a perfect world, you've kind of met your neighbors a little bit. At least know their name or enough to talk to them a little bit. In between, hopefully a better relationship. But when things hit the fan, if you're the guy who's got a year's worth of stockpiled food and they don't have any, it's one of those things to me where it's like, okay, all the neighborhood kids in my neighborhood play together, right? Am I really going to sit there and watch my neighbor's kids die because they weren't prepared? Or am I going to, like, can I live with myself to do that? Or am I going to be like, you know what? We've got a year's worth of food. We're good for a year. They have nothing. Can I put together at least a week's worth of rations they can spread out, help them out, right? And
And
and instead of them being like, oh, we have to storm his house and take all his fucking food. How much more of that's going to be like, oh, thank God, thank you so much. You know what I mean? How much goodwill did I just buy myself? How much? Because the other thing too is like, it's me, my wife, and 2 kids, right? So if I have to sleep at some point, right? And so unless me and my
100%.
wife want to do rotating 12-hour watches, I'm gonna need some help, right? How much easier
Exactly.
it is to convince somebody to stay and watch when I'm paying them in food, you know?
Yeah, and even bringing them into your home for that.
Yeah,
You know
that
what I
too.
mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Because and you don't covering what you're saying here. You don't have to be in front of God and everybody being like, here's that week's worth of food.
yeah.
You can be hold some sort of anonymity with it because there is a part of the day called nighttime, and you could potentially wait till they're sleeping and just drop it off, hide it for them.
Yeah,
So when
exactly.
they wake up in the morning, they're like, where the hell did this come from? And then
I think
at some point, just be like, hey, yep, I got you.
well, and that's the thing too is it's like if you're going to sit here and say like I'm doing this to better my community and to like help people out, right? But then the minute something actually happens, you turn into like this is my fortress of solitude, right? are you really living up to that standard that you're setting yourself, right? And
No,
like,
and the
yeah, like
community
to
is a big part of it. You have to have that. If you don't have that,
absolutely.
you have
Well, yeah, I
nothing.
mean, like, it's one of those things where it's like, to a certain extent, you have to be able to take care of yourself first, right? To a certain
Yeah,
extent, right? And, not to be self-sacrificial about it.
right.
Not like I only have one can of beans left for my family, but I'll give it away, right?
Yeah,
Not like that, but it's like, look, if you're the guy who's well stocked, like and you have more than what you need necessarily when the time comes down to it, like that's a commodity now that you can use for for your purposes. And the thing too is like maybe it's not necessarily buying goodwill. Maybe it's like, hey, I need something built. Like for example, the house I live in, right? I've thought about this before. So like we have just like central air, right? And I was like, man, it gets cold here in the winter. How are we gonna heat the house if like the power goes out, right? In this like long term, right? Like I've got like the buddy heaters and stuff like that, but I'm like, how hard would it be to like retrofit like a wood stove in here if it really came down to it, right? And
yeah,
it's like, you know what? If I don't have the expertise to do that, but I have food and the other guy need food and he has the expertise to do that, guess what I
yeah.
just got?
Prioritize it.
Yeah, I mean, like that's what I'm saying. It's things like that, right? Where it's like, okay, how do I get what I don't have, and what do I do have that other people want, right? Like you become a stock market right there.
Hmm.
Food, clean water, things like that, medical stuff, things like that. And so that's a big part of it. And it's kind of funny. I think you said something just a little bit ago about how like kind of training that out of the culture. That's
Yeah,
the funny thing is it really wasn't that long ago that was common. Like the 60s,
right.
70s, even into the 80s. The idea of like having at least a cellar, if not a bunker. With some stuff, and also depending on the part of the country, it's still like if you live in tornado areas or hurricane areas, like this is a very common thing that you have
Yeah,
some supplies on standby. I know it's hurricane season. I know it's tornado season. Odds are we might see, or
yeah. And there's still though, is still there's those people that,
yeah,
and hurricanes come and are like, oh my god, I got to go get 730 rolls of toilet paper. You know what I mean? So it's like, in the other chunk of that too is with when COVID came around, that I do believe was, and I think we talked about it, that was a psychological operation to fracture that last remaining piece of community. And back in the day it was like, oh yeah, we're living in town, it's like I know every single one of my neighbors, I know who their kids are, I know them all by name, I know when their birthdays are, we have barbecues all the time, and you knew the type of people you were next to,
yeah,
right? And now we're sitting in, man, they have a flag in their yard,
yeah,
I can't even look at them. Well, now go into a shit has hit the fan scenario. You don't even know who is going to be an asset to you because the entire community doesn't even look at each other or wave or any of that stuff. And that could be a very, very dangerous piece of this realm of holy shit. Because like you said, what if you didn't know that your neighbor knew how to make a fireplace in your house or retrofit one? You would
right,
never know to ask.
right,
And I wouldn't know if this one over here is going to be desperate enough to come kick my door in because I have no interpersonal relationship with them. The community factor of all this is they almost whittled that out of society. There are, breaths of fresh air, throughout the United States, but, unfortunately, like I'll admit, I live in a city. I live in a
yeah,
suburb of Denver, and it's like everybody's out for themselves, and
right,
I can't trust my family's safety with a lot of these people in the we our cul-de-sac, and then what happens outside the cul-de-sac. I couldn't trust anybody. I can trust my neighbors, direct neighbors, but where does that
yeah.
line have to get drawn? And that's the part that exists now that I don't think existed, even like you're saying, all the way into the 80s, early 90s, and now
Yeah.
it's just completely different.
Well, I agree. I think COVID definitely played a big role in it. I think it also depends on where you're at too. So that's funny, kind of an interesting case study where I'm at. So are you familiar with where Spokane is? Spokane. Oh,
Yep.
yeah. Okay. So I'm in the Spokane Coeur d'Alene area, right? So North Idaho, Eastern Washington. So I lived in the Spokane area, in and around there most of my life until about 2.5 years ago when we moved to Idaho. Finally, we just crossed the border, so I'm only like 20 minutes from where I used to live, right?
Nice.
And it really is funny because me and my wife used to talk about during COVID. I don't know how to explain it, but it was almost like we legit felt like we crossed the border into Idaho, and it was almost like a spiritual experience. Like you felt like a weight get lifted off your shoulders because Washington was just like super gay with COVID, and then Idaho was like, we don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
We were always spending time in Coeur d'Alene, like getting away from everything, and it's interesting because like like so we lived in town, we lived in an apartment. We didn't know anybody that lived next to us. Like we saw them every now and then, but like we never talked to them. And it wasn't like that we didn't want to. It was just that I don't know, it was a weird vibe to it. It was just we didn't really know who lived near us. We saw them every now and then. Like oh hey man, how's it going? Just a nice little casual talk as you make your way out to the car at the same time. That's about it. And then we move out here, and I grew up in small towns within about an hour's drive of the Spokane area. Joined the Navy, left home, came back whenever got married and had kids and everything, and was living in town. That's kind of where we didn't know anybody.
Yep.
Move out here to a small town in North Idaho, and like I know most of the people on my street. If I don't know them well, I at least know that like I know who they are, or like, oh, who's that? Oh yeah, that kid. That they're the ones down in the fourth house on the right. It's and all the kids play together and run around the yard, and it's one of these things too where it's like I could literally wake up and be like, okay, kids, go play, and then be home by whenever, and I don't have to worry about them. You know what I mean? They can just be gone, right? And so I think that's kind of one of those things, and talking a little bit about bring back in that package you sent up here in Coeur d'Alene. For I'm sure probably most people know about it by now. There was a guy that, so the official story now is that this dude, 20-year-old guy, we don't really quite know why still, went up to the woods, and it's kind of like a woods area just outside of town. Like it's still kind of in town, if that makes sense. Like it's just on the edge of town, right? Like it's like a quarter mile for some houses. It's not far. It's like a trailhead behind some houses up on a ridge. And he started a fire up there, lured in some firefighters, killed 2. Another one just got off of intensive care. He's still long road to recovery. And so tragic thing that happened. Everyone by this point, I'm sure, is aware of the Coeur d'Alene shooting with the firefighters. But the entire community has dropped everything to focus on this. And it's one of these things where it's like, it is an incredibly sad and tragic thing that happened, but it is so touching to see like the extent at which the community is going to take care of these guys. Like they had donation boxes for stuff that they could do like raffles with to raise money for the families. I mean, they were full like the next day, right?
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, like everybody and their brother is like, shut up and take my money, right? The local brewery, the local breweries here, 10 of them got together, and they're doing there's a thing here called the Red and Blue Foundation, which also, if anyone does want to donate to the families of those guys who survived, I'll have a link down below to where you can. But they're doing the Red and Blue Brewing is what they're calling it, and so each one of them is making a specific brew that they're releasing sometime this month. And all of the proceeds when you order that brew will go to funding the families. There's one for each officer, or one for each firefighter that died, and one for the guy who was recovering. And so all of the money goes to those guys. And all of the local businesses around here are doing fundraisers, and they're putting stuff together and doing things like that. And it's really just it's really heartwarming to see that kind of community still exist, Yes. And I can't tell you how many times I've been on Instagram seeing so let me back up. On the day that they passed, their bodies were transported later that day to the Spokane County coroner, and impromptu they did it as a procession of all the emergency vehicles, like a big long parade, like a funeral procession. And there's a 30-mile stretch from where we are at to where they were going, and the entire roadway was lined with people waving American flags and saluting. Fire departments and police officers and National Guard out there paying their respects. And then they came back, I think it was 2 days later from the coroner, back to Coeur d'Alene to get ready to be laid to rest. And like the same way coming back, the entire area came out to show respect for this. And it was like, I can't say how many times like going through Instagram and stuff, people are like, that's America. Like that's small town America. And I'm so fortunate, I think, to live in an area that still has that. And to touch on that, I had reached out to you, and it's super awesome for you to do this, but this guy is why Crackshot is one of the real homies. So he put together several of these kits, as well as a few other things. He's got some, let me just grab them real quick. So he's put together some larger kits, his life bivvies, a bunch of other things. I've got quite a few of these. I've got a huge, big cardboard box that he sent up here of these, and I'm going to be bringing these down on his behalf to the firehouses that were affected and donating these to the cause to basically show that we support these guys. You've got a really heartfelt letter as well that you wrote, read that, and that's going to be the whole goal here is to try to give back to these guys and to show that, like, in the midst of all of this, it doesn't matter how far away we are, we're all Americans. This was tragic what happened, and that I think it's really awesome that you're doing this and that you put your heart where you put your money where your mouth is, and you're led by your heart in that way.
Yep.
To be like, look, man, I mean, like, I think there's what, like six IFAKs, and the big one, and then a bunch of other smaller things. Which, like I said, I know you already don't have a huge profit margin on these, and you sent these up here for free and paid to ship them for yourself. So I know that, like, to me that means a lot. When it's one thing when a company that has, like, a multi-million-dollar budget and is like, here's a free thing. You know what I mean? It's like, that's a drop in the bucket. Like, they have a whole marketing division designed just to do that, right? They have a whole line of products that's just like, this is just free stuff to give away for marketing. But it's like when it's a mom and pop shop like you guys, right? And you're like, fuck it, I don't care if we lose money. This is the right thing to do. Like, that's something to me that speaks volumes, that I hope, like, my hope because of this is that, like, I want to see crack shot preparedness be like the next big thing. I just want you guys to explode into a huge deal and be led with that same kind of spirit, because that's what I think America's all about, especially, like, if we get into, like, the business side of things, right? Everyone talks about, like, evil businessman, blah, 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 blah. Well, if you have that kind of heart and you can keep that as you build the company, I mean, that right there is what we need. You know what I mean? That's what we need, not some suits that are like, I don't care. You know what I mean? And I think it is really telling to see in events like this who helps and who doesn't,
Yeah. And the idea, and when we had a conversation about this, is, I never want to get to a point where, we get to hit that, we're that big that our heart fell out.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, we're not here to just make money. We're here to try to make a difference. And,
Yeah.
Every time that we have sent a kit out, whether it be for a raffle, we've had our stuff in a couple raffles, customers purchasing it, whatever it ends up being, it's literally me and my wife that are in this company. We have nobody else. So we have that availability to create and write a letter of thanks, a handwritten letter that goes with everything that we have sold. And I never want to hit a point where we are too big to not be able to do that. Even if we end up with, 300 employees and we have the ones making the kits and then one's packing the kits and sending them out, there will be a letter in every single one of these. We don't want to get so big that we will not let ourselves get so big that our heart falls out.
Yeah.
We want this to be a driving force that exists throughout the entirety of our company.
Well, I think that's the awesome thing about, like, the advent of kind of like the social media space that we do have, is for all the evils that exist with it. Yeah. The nice thing is that, and especially doing this podcast, that's really given me a lot of hope, because I've touched base with a lot of smaller companies like this, to where that's the cool thing about this community in my mindset, is that there are a lot of people out there that have their heads in the right places, and they may not be they might not be the biggest thing yet, right? But they're building that community. They're doing the right thing, and I think a lot of us in this space are much more comfortable spending our money with smaller businesses like that have good heart and good mission behind it than they are with the big names. And at least I speak for myself when I say that. It's especially, it's like when I have a personal connection like this, it's like when I'm looking for IFAKs like that. Like even in the off case that, like I said, maybe I found something that's like, oh, this is a killer deal, right? Like, I'd rather the money go to you in that sense, because I know where your heart's at, I know where your mind's at. And same thing with we're seeing this all over kind of this space of the kind of the Minuteman preparedness stuff, where look at and another facet of things like Hammy 3D prints, right? Have you ever seen it? Yeah, his stuff, like, that guy exploded out of nowhere, you know what I mean? Like, and he makes good stuff and his heart's in the right place. And, you see a bunch of smaller companies like that arising and people willing to spend their money with that. And I don't know if maybe it's just our weaponized autism that leads us to find these smaller companies like that. But yeah, that's kind of my thing, is it's like, I like the ability to know that there's a real person behind this that has a real heart and skin in the game and a similar mindset. And it's not just some giant corporation that's pumping out stuff and they're like, hey, let's put a chick with her tits out with an M60 and we'll sell everything. You know what I mean? Like, look, I'm as red-blooded American as the next guy, but it's like, okay, as cool as that is, I'd much rather support someone that I know is making the difference that I want to see, you know? So that's kind of where my heart is with that. And that's the coolest thing I think that's been about this whole like podcasting experience is just getting to be able to touch base and meet so many different people that I've met through this that like to a person are just genuine, down to earth, good people, you know? And that's the cool thing about this is seeing that it gives me hope, you know, that I know sometimes it's real easy to get like a real tragic outlook when we see all the kind of crazy shit that's going on out in the world and in our own country. We're like, man, we're fucked, right? And then I hop on something like this and I'm like, you know what? Maybe we're doing all right. Maybe we'll be okay.
There's a candle in the darkness out there somewhere.
Yeah.
When you actually get to see it, get to find it, you know, and that's the true thing is lots can change as long as you still have some semblance of hope and some semblance of humanity. And even in the you know, shit hitting the fan realm, you know, what you were talking about in the community pieces of this is maintaining humanity through that and remembering truly what you're fighting for or you're trying to survive for or what you're coming together for is that hope actually in action and being able to keep that humanity. I think whether you're a small company or a big company, you can't lose your humanity in any piece of in any facet of this because then what are you doing it for?
Yeah. You know, it's funny that you say that, the humanity part. It reminded me of a conversation I had with my cousin who most of my family, to some more extensive than others, are in the kind of prepper mindset-ish type of, like, we all grew up pretty poor, which I think also helps with that mindset for sure.
Yes.
But also, like, we're all a pretty strong Christian family and came up that way. And kind of this idea that, like, yeah, you know, the world's going to get bad. It's in the book. I read the book. I know how it ends, you know?
Yep.
You know, we're like, oh, crazy things are happening? Oh, yeah, checks out, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was talking to my cousin about this one time, and he was like, yeah, man. He's like, you know, when stuff happens, I'm going to start feeding people. And we were kind of talking. I was like, you know, well, yeah, but what about, like, what if they come for your stuff? And he's like, okay. I was like, what do you mean, okay? Like, you're not gonna? He's like, look, man, they need it more than I do, and if I die, I know where we're going. So it kind of challenged me with that too, where I was like, man, that's, you know, it was like this is back when I was kind of like early into that whole, like, you know, oh, they're coming for my beans, you know. And he was like, look, man, like, the whole reason I'm stockpiling food is to feed people. He's like, I have more food than I need to feed my family. He's like, what kind of piece of crap would I be to, like, turn people away that need help?
Yeah.
But my cousin at the time is a firefighter, and he's like, my job is literally saving people. And he's like, I'm not going to stop that just because it's inconvenient now, or it might be more dangerous. And he's like, look, if we believe that God's going to provide, he's going to provide, and if he doesn't, then I know where I'm going. And it's like, okay, then those people need the food more than I do, because he's like, I have my eternal safety secured. They might not, so they'll get another day. And if anyone's going to go, it should be me. And I was like, man, that, you know, see, that is a mentality. I think that it's like, it's really hard to see nowadays, where this idea of, like, it's something I'm like, I try to be really cautious about when I do social media stuff, especially like whenever, like, doing stuff like this with, like, partnering with you to help bring these kits to the firefighters, is it's like, I don't want this to be seen as like a social media stunt, you know what I mean? Or like, oh, it's good publicity, give me free things, or like, oh, put me in a paper, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, it's like, I think there should be recognition, not towards me, but like towards the people who are doing, like, I want you to get recognition for this in the sense that, like, you're the one who provided the stuff for it. But, Leo, you and I talked, that's not why we're doing this. We're not doing this for recognition. We're not doing it for this. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do. And that's something I think is, I'm always worried about, is being perceived as not doing it for the right reasons. You know, and I hope that people have followed me long enough to know that, like, I'm doing this for the good reason. I'm doing this for the right reason.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of, I mean, you and I both know there's a lot of bullshit out there. I got, like, all those fucking videos where it's like some dude walking around with a camera and being like, you know, hey, homeless guy, name 3 presidents and I'll give you $100 or some shit like that. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, just give him the fucking money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Turn the fucking camera off, give him the money, shut up about it. You know, and it's always,
are you gonna not give him the money if you can't name anyone?
right. Or, like, you know, it's always stuff like that. And, like, I understand there's a certain level of, like, well, maybe he's inspiring people to do goodwill, things like that. But there's always ones where it's, like, performative, you know? And that's the thing, is like, I always get worried about that. And like, I don't want people to think this is performative, because it's definitely not. And I want it
And
to
I would
be
just as content with, having this be brought up on the podcast as I would having just me, you, and the fire department know it happened.
Yeah, I mean, that's my thing, is like, that was the thing like we talked about, was like, I want to do this, it's like, I want to wait for all the hype to die down, right? And not roll in there day one, because I don't want it to be seen as like, hey, I'm trying to make benefit off of tragedy. You know what I mean? But
Right.
it's been a while now. Things have settled down. We can go take this in. We're not asking for any publicity, but yeah, I think there's a big thing out there too, where my thing is to try to like inspire other people to do stuff too. Because the thing, like the whole point of this podcast from the beginning was always like, you see stuff out there, and it's always like, I'm a former Navy SEAL with 13 combat tours, and now I have this multi-billion-dollar survival company, and I'm going to go do this. And then you're like, that's cool. I work a day job and I make $60,000 a year. I can't even remotely compete with this, right? It's like, I have bills and kids and things like this, and a car payment and a mortgage, and then it's like, so the whole point was, let's dumb it down a little bit, right? And get it to where like, okay, now it's like, okay, so if I'm a normal dude and I can do it, you can do it, right? Yeah. And so my whole thought has always been like, okay, so if I can show people, yep, I'm almost done, I'll be right there. Okay. She's super stoked about these kits, by the way. But yeah. Anyway, yeah, I was like, my whole thing is like, my whole thing is, if on this side of things we can show people that like, hey, there are ways that you can make a difference even at the smallest level. Like dude, like when it comes to the social media space and that, like I don't have pull. Like, I'm some no-name YouTuber. I have 3,500 viewers, right? And I'm not bragging about that. Like, that's not a lot, right?
I have 59.
Hey, I realized I wasn't subscribed to you the other day, so one of those is me. So, but yeah, it's like, the thing is, like, we did it with Hurricane Helene, we did it with all this, where I'm like, you know what? My thing is, I know I can't be everywhere at once. Financially, I can't just throw money at problems, how can I help, right? And like one of the things I'm good at is reaching out to people and coordinating with the job I have and some of the other things that I do and my schedule. Like, I have some time on my hands where I have the availability to reach out to people, right? And talk to people. And one thing I've learned from that is there's a whole lot of people that are willing to help. You just got to ask. They just don't know where they need to go, right? Or what they need to do, right? Like these things in Texas. You got these tragic floods in Texas, right? There's tons of people around the country that want to help, but it's like, what do I do? Where do I go? Or even this thing in Coeur d'Alene, it's like everyone's like, I want to do something, but what do I do that would help, right? Where do I go that's not hurting,
And there's a full avenue of people that have that mindset of, I don't know what to do. What do I need to do? And they don't trust hey, send money over to this place. We'll make sure that the people that need it get it.
Yeah.
They would rather literally walk there and hand it to somebody rather than hand it to a corporation or whatever. Which I understand, because there's been a lot of corrupt stuff that's happened. But if
Hurricane Helene was a great example of that.
Man, yeah. And if we can somehow, find a way to be the bridge on that gap, to be able to point people in the right direction, awesome.
Yeah.
If we have to hand deliver it, awesome.
Yeah. And I think, like, going back to the Helene thing, like, that's like when we did our fundraiser here, I had a hard time trying to like figure out, where do I send the money? And I had to do like a lot of vetting through that, because I was like, I do not want this to go to any government agency or government affiliated thing. Like, I want this to go to someone who's actually doing there and actually doing something. And we wound up settling on Samaritan's Purse after doing a lot of investigating of like who's actually going to do something, but is also notable enough to where like the money will do a difference, and actually get to where it needs to go. And that's kind of where we lived with that. But I definitely get that distrust with that, because like, there's misuse of government funds and things like that. And if anyone felt like helping, I don't know if they do after Helene, you know what I mean? The way it was handled. And so, I think that's the thing is people like you who are willing to step up and fill that gap across the board, whether it be filling the gap in the need of, like, finding the need of like, hey, there are average people that need affordable medical kits. I'm going to make them. I'm going to make the same quality stuff. I'm going to cut our costs or margins or whatever I got to do to make this affordable, to make it accessible to everybody. Whether it be stepping into the gap that way, or whether it be stepping into the gap of like, I'm going to get this stuff sent out to help these people in Coeur d'Alene, or future projects that I won't give too much away, but I know you and I are working on something special, but we're not going to touch on that until that's official. So to be continued.
Yes.
But yeah, you and I are working on something special with that, and so yeah, I think that's a thing that I think is important to see, and I think the most powerful movements like that start when it's normal people that see a need and they start to fill it. And that's the thing, is it's like, I'm in Idaho, you're in Colorado, for all intents and purposes, outside of the internet, we would not know each other, and we have no business with each other's, with in any way, right? And now you and I are talking about, like, hey, how do we help this? How do we help here? Like, that's what I'm saying, is like, you're in Colorado outside of Denver, and you saw an event take place in Idaho, and we're like, I need to do something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that to me, like, that's important. I wish that mentality existed more widespread, and I think that we're starting to see it a little bit more as we see the failures of government systems. We see the failures of all these different agencies. We're starting to realize, again, I think there's kind of been an awakening post-COVID, where over the last several years, that, like, no one is coming. You are on your own, and we are all we got. And
you
seeing
will 100% be your own first responder.
absolutely, and I think
as brutal as it can be.
we're seeing more and more small companies like this realize that, like, no one's coming, I got to step in the gap. And we're seeing people and companies and things like that, and realizing that, like, the only people that can help us is us. And so I think that it's one of those things where it's the best worst. It's the worst best thing, or best worst thing.
Best case scenario, or best
Yeah,
case
something like
scenario?
that, where it's like, it sucks that it had to happen, but because it did, everyone started to pull their head out of their ass and was like, oh, this is a problem and we need to do something about it. And so I do think there is hope in that sense, though, where I do think we are having kind of a renaissance in that area, where we're seeing more and more people realize that, like, I need to get involved. I need to do something. I need to be part of my community. I need to get involved with how to help it, and how to, not be a liability, but to be an asset in some form, shape, or way, And I think, like, the idea of being in a group of people that are like-minded, prepared to survive and defend yourselves, is becoming less taboo than it was 5 years ago. A couple years.
Yep.
Yeah, a couple years back, you drop the militia word, and everyone looks at you like you said a racial slur.
Yeah.
And now people are like, Minuteman groups, whatever you want to call it. Like, the terminology has changed, but it's the same thing, And that,
Yes.
the unique thing about America has always been, like, this idea of, hey, let's get people together, circle the wagons, and make sure we come out on top.
Yep. Yeah, I
So
100% agree with that.
yeah. Well, so with that, man, any closing thoughts?
I guess stay tuned for that little teaser that you tossed out there.
Yeah.
Try to get some wrinkles ironed out, and hopefully, be able to really make a push on making a difference.
Yeah.
On the other side of that, whether you're just browsing through our website to get an idea what we have, it's crackshotpreparedness.com. Come take a look and see what we got. We'll be out at Goals this year. That's out in Knoxville in August.
What is Goals?
It's Gun Owners of America this is their second year doing it. It's a big expo, leadership, gun advocacy, and new companies that are, up and coming. So we'll be out there with media badges, so we'll get to walk around.
Sweet.
And talk to people, so that'll be awesome. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the works right now that we're trying to get ironed out. To be more, I guess, on my side, more fulfilling for me, but more beneficial for whoever ends up stumbling across our website or our gear, or our Instagram and YouTube, that in the next couple of years, I think we'll have a good foothold in quite a few different areas that are going to be exceptionally beneficial to the everyday person. So be on the lookout for new drops and stuff. But yeah, other than that, let's keep moving in a way that, as our motto is, keeps us forever free.
Heck yeah, dude. I'm super excited for that. I'm excited for you guys. Like I said, I think what you guys are doing is fantastic. I hope you guys knock it out of the park. I hope you just explode overnight and you're like, what am I going to do with all these orders? So if this gets your word out there and helps out in any way, that's what I'm hoping for. I think you guys are doing great stuff. Like I said, for those out there listening, I'll have all his links down below in the description for YouTube, Instagram, and website. Go check him out. He's got some super solid stuff. It's really good. Trust me. the greatest. Some
That was
people, great
good.
people, amazing people. They tell me all the time, this stuff's great. But no, he's got some really good kits, guys. And especially like if you're into this kind of thing, you'll notice like these are good, solid rigs, and they're not incredibly expensive. Like you're not paying anywhere near what you pay for some of the higher like cost stuff with this. Like, but it's the same gear, it's the same kit. He's not cheaping out on anything. It's good stuff. He's a good guy. Obviously, if you haven't picked up on that in the last hour, then you're probably retarded.
I'm special.
But yeah, like I said, man, like I said, guys, for those of you listening, if you want to support someone who's actually got their heart in this and then in the right place, go check them out, Crack Shop Preparedness. With that, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and we will catch you on the next episode, and updates soon to be coming with some cool stuff later down the road. Peace.
I appreciate you, dude. We'll see you.
See ya.